If you want to be an influential communicator, you're probably falling into the biggest trap I see out there, and that is the misconception that it's fake confidence and force that creates influence. And I'm here to tell you that is not the case. You see, being an influential communicator comes down to being trustworthy and credible. And how you do that is through 3 core signals that you are constantly sending out without even knowing. So in today's video, I'm going to help you understand the psychology behind how to be an influential communicator using your inner cues, your verbal cues, and your visual cues. And when all 3 are aligned, that is how you build trust and credibility without even trying. Let's get right into it. So the biggest misconception that I see is the idea that confidence is a personality trait and that influence is a byproduct of being confident. That's why so many people, when they try to be more effective or more influential communicators, they end up feeling like they're forcing some kind of fake confidence ploy that everyone else is just on the verge of uncovering. And that's not it. As a social and personality psychologist, I am here to tell you that number 1, confidence is not a personality trait. Confidence is a byproduct of how you think and how you function. But number 2, personality traits range. You are not set in stone with how you think your personality is. Think of your personality as the scaffolding or the container within which you are held. But your personality gets to change and merge and increase or decrease depending on the situation and honestly, depending on the story that you tell yourself. If you've ever noticed this, your brain is extremely good at categorizing and compartmentalizing situations. That's why you might say, I am a terrible public speaker and have this public speaking box over here, but then at the same time say, I'm an extremely confident, carefree, influential communicator within my group of friends in this little compartment over here. And in reality, there's different facets of us. There's different versions of us. There's different interpretations of us that come through depending on the situation or the environment or the box that we've labeled it, as well as our own beliefs, our own stories, our own interpretation of how we should act. So if you're with your group of friends and you think that being carefree, being laid back, being comfortable is a priority and that's how you're comfortable communicating, you will feel way more confident. But if you look at something like a work environment or a work presentation and you think that you're supposed to be polished, poised, not a single filler word, extremely authoritative, and that's not how you identify, then of course it's going to be extremely challenging to get you there. So in today's video, we are breaking down the 3 types of signals you are constantly putting out, regardless of the situation that you are in. And when you understand the nature of these 3 signals, when you understand how they work for you and against you, that's when you can start to shift and merge these signals to actually create the type of message, the type of impact, and the type of influence that you are craving. Because let's be real, we are all tired of not living up to our own standards. And even if you're not someone who talks about it openly, I know that the inner feeling and the inner resistance is there. So if this is resonating, hang tight. Now, the 3 types of signals that I mentioned, internal, verbal, and visual. Let's unpack this. Your internal signals are how you think. This is your self-concept, your self-belief, and your self-control. Your verbal signals are how you talk. This is the big 3, as I like to call them, like your volume, your pace, your tone. This is also the word choice that you're using. And this is the amount of pauses and filler words that are included in your message. And your visual signals is how you look. And this is your body language, your facial expressions, and also the general style, the vibe, as well as the angles of you visually. So hang tight for that one. We'll unpack it more later in the video. Now, if you watch nothing else, this is the biggest takeaway I want you to have from this video. People listen to your message. They feel the emotion in your words, and they look at your delivery. When all 3 combine and are cohesive and each convey the same message, that is when you start to build trust and credibility. And the combination of trust and credibility is what creates influence. But if what you're saying does not match the feeling, and there's a mismatch between how you look while you're saying it, well, then it's no wonder that you are losing trust, you're losing credibility, you are losing impact, and you have no influence. So let's go through each type of signal. So first we have your internal signals. Now this is your self-concept, your self-talk, and your self-control. Let's go through each one real quick. Your self-concept is what you believe about yourself. It's the words that you would use to describe yourself. It's the identity labels that you use. It's who you think you are and how you think you should be. So if fundamentally you're someone who says, I'm not cut out to be a leader, I'm not good at coaching others, I'm terrible at public speaking, well, the fact that you believe that means when you are put into those types of situations, it's going to be extremely hard to act in a way that contradicts what you believe about yourself. Now, your self-talk is a reflection of your self-concept. Your self-talk is the inner dialogue that you have with yourself. It's how you think to yourself. It's whether when something happens, you give yourself a pep talk. If you have that growth mindset and you're like, let's get it, better next time, you've got this, great attempt. Or if you tend to be self-critical and to put yourself down and to say things like, why did I even try? Why bother? You're so stupid. What were you thinking? Of course you failed. The difference in self-talk makes a major difference in how you come across. Again, your self-talk will always be a reflection of your self-concept. If you think you're a wonderful person, if you think you're great at learning, if you think you do a wonderful job trying new things and getting better, then of course it's going to be so much easier to give yourself those pep talks, to motivate yourself to try, to not beat yourself up at the end of the night for something that didn't go according to plan. But if your self-concept tends to be more negative, if you think you're not good enough, if you think you're not worthy enough, if you have imposter syndrome, then of course the way that you think and talk to yourself will reflect that, and it will come through in moments of doubt. You will lean into the doubt. You will lean into the hesitation. You will convince yourself that you should be anxious and nervous because of XYZ reason. And so if you're not sure what your self-concept is really like, start to pay attention to how you talk to yourself. And a great way to do this for beginners is to just stop at random moments during the day and to just actually think about your thinking and just take note. What was I just thinking about? How was I thinking it? If I was to rate it as positive or negative, how would I rate it? And at the end of the day, tally it up. How many times did you have positive thoughts? How many times did you have negative thoughts? It's a simple way, but it's an extremely effective way to start to get a sense of how you actually think. Now, the third piece of this is your self-control. And self-control is a really interesting one because most people overlook this in their communication. Now, your self-control comes down to, think of this as your motivation, as your discipline, as your determination, and as your ability to do the things that you're supposed to do despite the emotions that you might be feeling. So if you have to give that big talk at work and you're anxious and you're nervous, can you still follow through? Can you still try and regulate your breathing? Do you still show up and give the talk to the best of your ability, despite what you may be feeling? Your self-control is the ability to recognize what you're feeling, how you are feeling, and how you should be acting in the moment instead. And so it's that ability to have emotional intelligence with yourself and to regulate your emotions in real time. Now, the reason that most people overlook this is because they treat communication as an external thing. Show up, speak like this, follow this formula, plug and play, boom, bam, go. But I'm not here to do that because I fundamentally don't believe in that. As a psychologist, I can tell you that how you think, what your self-concept is like, what your inner dialogue is, has a massive influence on how you speak. Whatever you are thinking will always come across in your words. So stay tuned for that in a moment. So now that you understand your self-talk, your self-concept, and your self-control, let's unpack how this comes through as signals. So your internal signals start in your mind. These are the things that you're thinking. These are the things that these are the thoughts that you're having about the thing you're about to say. And here's the catch. Whatever you are thinking will always impact how you say it. So if you are nervous, If you are uncertain, if you are full of that self-doubt and are telling yourself, how am I going to get through this presentation? I'm so nervous. I don't know. I suck at public speaking. Well, what's going to happen? You will use more filler words. You will speak at a faster pace. You might go completely off track, start rambling, and then blank and lose your train of thought. Your pitch and your intonation will change. You'll start sounding more like this at the end of every sentence because of the uncertainty and the doubt that is in your mind. When your internal signals are giving you the red light, you have things like the nerves and the anxiety that come through in the way that you talk. When your internal signals are giving you the green light and the go-ahead, you sound more confident. Think of it as like being with your friends. It's easy to speak. You say what you need to say without self-doubt and overthinking and trying to phrase it 7 different ways before the words come even out of your mouth. And so your internal signals, whether you're giving yourself the red light, the green light, or maybe even a yellow light and hesitating, that will always dictate how you actually start to speak. Which brings us to your verbal signals. Your verbal signals come through in your communication. So first, it's the big 3 that I like to unpack: your volume, your pace, and your tone. You can either come through and speak really quietly like this with a lot of hesitation. And a good sign if you do that is people will constantly say, "What? Huh? Can you repeat that? I didn't catch that." And so if you're giving yourself the yellow light or the red light internally, and that self-doubt is there, it will come through in your volume. And you might speak more quietly and more hesitantly. Speaking up really loud will feel extremely difficult, right? That's your volume. Then there's your pace, which is how fast or how slow you seem to talk when you talk. And your pace is a really interesting thing because naturally most people have variety to their pace, almost like rhythm in the song. Some people naturally speak just a little bit faster all the time. Some people naturally speak a little bit slower. But the important thing is to pay attention to what your baseline is and how that baseline changes depending on whether you're giving yourself the internal red light, yellow light, or green light. When it comes to your pace, it's not only an indication of how you are thinking, but it's an indication to other people of what you are thinking. So if I was sitting here speaking really fast about your pace the entire time, and I was trying to convince you that I'm a strong, influential communicator because I know how to talk and I haven't said a single filler word, but my pace is so incredibly quick that it's hard to keep up, that doesn't make me very influential now, does it? Instead, you would probably think I 2x the speed, or that I'm extremely nervous, or maybe that I need to go to the bathroom and I'm just trying to wrap this up, right? It's not a good look. And the same thing happens to you with your pace. Now, the last one is your tone. And tone is so incredibly important because tone comes through automatically unless you're working on that self-control. Now, your tone is the emotion in your voice. Think of this as letting people know how you feel about what you're saying. And the reason I say your tone comes through automatically is because you could be talking about whatever it is that you're talking about, but if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling upset, that will always naturally come through. And so it's really important to understand that your tone, not only does it come through automatically, but it is a major indication to other people about how you really feel. So that's the big 3, your pace, your volume, your tone. Then we have the amount of pauses and filler words that you're using. Now, this is a huge indication of your verbal signals because if you're someone who's like speaking like this and every other like word is kind of like using a filler word, and if you're someone like who has to record content, like you might have a lot of like editing to do, and like it's not a good look either. It completely destroys your credibility. Now, one of the reasons that I love to edit my videos as minimally as possible is specifically so that you guys can see how free flow I speak and how I naturally sound without eliminating filler words or pauses or phrases, because I have taught myself to eliminate those from my speech from the get-go. And so how often you pause and how many filler words you're using is an indication to other people of how credible you are based on how much you trust what you are saying, based on how good you are at conveying your message, for lack of a better word. because you might be an expert in your field. You might know something in and out like the back of your hand and just be so incredibly passionate. But if you're speaking with a like and an and an on every other word, people lose interest. And then that fuels the self-doubt. So that's the next one. Now, the last one that I want to include in your verbal signals is your word choice itself. Now, the reason I include this is because word choice is so incredibly important. And again, as a psychologist, as someone who analyzes the nitty-gritty of communication, I fundamentally believe that how you say something is a reflection of what you actually think about it. So an easy example is if you ask someone, how are you? And they hit you with a good, classic, standard, okay, a little bit hard to interpret. But if they hit you with a fine, okay, pretty good, excellent, right? You start to understand the nuance of how they might actually be feeling. Like if they say excellent, but they have a smirk or they sound depressed, you might pick up on the sarcasm and immediately understand, okay, they are not doing good at all today, right? If you are, let's say you're on a sales call and you're thinking about purchasing a new car or a new course or something of that nature, and the person is trying to sell you on this, but they're saying things like probably, maybe, absolutely, right? It's these little nuances in the word choice that start to change the way that you interpret a message. A classic example of this is using qualifying words in your workplace. So whether you're a leader, whether you're a consultant, whether you're a coach, if you are making a suggestion and saying things like, I think you should do that, we should probably look into this. There's a lot more hesitation and uncertainty naturally in your message, which impacts how credible and how trustworthy and how influential you are. If every single thing that I say to you in this video was an uncertain suggestion, if I was to tell you, I think you should work on your self-talk because probably it's influencing your word choice. And I think that maybe if you're sending mixed signals, it's likely to harm your credibility. Can you tell the difference? How adding in the qualifiers, adding in specific words automatically change the nature of the message and how credible, trustworthy, and influential it comes across to you. So you have your internal signals that change how you feel about the situation. This influences your verbal signals, how you actually speak, how you sound when you're delivering your message, the type of communicator that you are. Well, the last one is your visual signals. So this is your body language, your facial expressions, and your appearance. And your appearance can be broken down into how you look, the vibe that you give off, as well as the actual angles that you're working with. So let's unpack this. Your body language includes things like your posture, your hand gestures, as well as your movements. So if you've ever looked into body language, for the purpose of lie detection, then you know that there's certain things that indicate when someone is thinking versus when someone is recalling information versus when someone is lying. And one of the classic signs of lying is scratching your nose right after you say something. And I love that example. It's really fun because anytime a public figure, a politician, an athlete says something and scratches their nose, it's always funny to be like, did they really mean it or not? But when it comes to body language, side note, if you're ever thinking about like lie detection, look for more than one change in body language, posture, hand gestures at the same time. And that is a much better indicator of someone lying than just rubbing their nose. But that's a side note. So your body language is an indication of how you feel. So your internal signals, I like to think of them as the actual base because they influence your verbal signals, but they also influence your visual signals. So if you're someone who's slouching, if you are someone who's fidgeting, if your foot is going like this constantly, if you're waving your hands in the air like you just don't care, you give a very different impression of who you are and how you come across and how serious or unserious you are, based visually on your movements and your body language. Then we have your facial expressions. If you are someone who's stoic and you don't make many facial expressions, pros and cons. You might have an amazing poker face, but also you come across as someone who lacks emotion, lacks empathy, lacks passion. And so it's important to pay attention to your facial expression because most people don't even know what their face looks like. And you're probably right there too. And anytime I start working with a new client and we do a mini audit of their facial expressions, it's always really interesting to notice how little they knew what their face was doing. And so you might think that you are sitting there making an intelligent thinking face because you're doing such incredible deep listening with your team member or your client. And in reality, you might just be coming across extremely bored and like you're falling asleep. And so most people have a disconnect between what their face looks like and what they think it looks like. But the most important thing you need to understand is that it doesn't matter what you think your face looks like. You need to understand what your face actually looks like because it's what other people see. And it's what other people gauge how the conversation is going based on. And so your facial expressions naturally change when you speak based on how you're thinking, based on how you're feeling, based on the reactions that you're having. Now, I want to make a quick distinction. There is your facial expressions, and that's sort of like the static image of your face for at least a second or two. But then there's also your micro expressions. And micro expressions are brief changes to your face. They usually last less than half a second, but they are so incredibly automatic because they are a natural reaction to what you just heard and how you feel about it. So if you're shocked, if you're angry, if something irked you, if you disagree, that will quickly come through in your micro expressions. And this is where going back to the inner signals comes in because you need that self-control. And quite honestly, most people lack it. And so if you're having a reaction to something and you make a face and you forget to change it, the other person sees and the other person picks up on it. And that is so incredibly important, especially if you are a leader who has to remain neutral and kind and open-minded and leading a team without judgment to create that psychological safety. Even if you're a consultant or a coach and you're working with a client who says something and you're like, I can't believe they just said that. Your face can't show it. Okay? So facial expressions are extremely important and so extremely overlooked. Now, the last one is your appearance. And this is where we get into how you come across visually. Because if you're trying to give a serious message, but maybe your hair is disheveled, maybe you've got something in your teeth, maybe you're wearing a t-shirt that's ripped and stained, they just don't match. The visual signals are screaming red light, while maybe your verbal signals are screaming green light, and people are just confused. Okay? And they might just walk away with like, yeah, that was good, but like, I don't know if he's worth that money, right? If you've ever been in a sales call, you know what I'm talking about. And so you have your visual appearance, quite literally how you look, your body language, your facial expressions being part of that. Then you also have the vibe or the style of you. Are you someone who's a little bit chaotic, erratic? Do you move around a lot? Do you fidget? Are you constantly changing how you sit? Are you someone who's sort of all over the place? Are you someone who's stoic and doesn't move and the person's not sure if the Zoom froze because you haven't moved in like 7 minutes, right? And then you have the framing. And so the framing is my favorite one because people don't really realize how important this is. But it's so incredibly important, especially online. And the framing is literally what it sounds like. Like, regardless of where you are, regardless of how you think you look, what do they actually see of you if you're online? How is your camera angle? How is your positioning? How is your lighting? Do they see you, or do they see you from an angle, hunched over with a hoodie on in the dark and grainy camera settings, and they're like, I feel like I'm talking to a coder from the 90s in their basement. Like, what is the visual information that you are giving? Is it a red light, a yellow light, or a green light based on just if they saw a static image of you? So that's what I mean when I say your appearance, your style, your vibe, and your framing. Now, when it comes to in-person conversations, it's still important to keep framing in mind because you just want to be mindful of how much they see of you and what you're doing with that. So if you're having a conversation face-to-face, let's say with a table between you, it's still important to be mindful. Like, can they see your hands? Do they see your full body and see you twitching and fidgeting and constantly crisscrossing, applesaucing your legs, like, what do they see? And just be mindful of that. Because even if let's say you're sitting across the table from me and we're having a conversation, but you're slouching and your hands are under the table and all I see is this the whole time, and maybe your internal signals are giving you the red light and you're just giving me puppy dog eyes and speaking really quietly, can you see how this starts to change how credible and influential you come across? Versus even something like sitting straight, leaning back. Even if we're having a conversation across the table and I could see your hands and you've got that good natural hand movement and you're speaking loud enough that I can hear you. What a difference. What a difference it makes in your credibility and your trust. And it's your credibility and your trust combined that make you influential or not. So now that you understand the importance of making your inner signals, your verbal signals, and your visual signals all be a green light, let's unpack the psychology about why we look at these signals. So I've already mentioned that people listen to the words and the message that you're saying, but people feel the emotion of that message. And they look at you while you deliver it, and they want all three to be in alignment. They want all three to be green lights so that they feel easy, so that they feel like they can trust you, so that they feel like the conversation went well, rather than when you send mixed signals and it leaves people feeling uneasy, leaves people feeling like they're being tricked or duped in some way, like there's more under the surface and they just haven't quite caught up to what it is yet. Because it's that uneasiness. If you are leaving people with that uneasiness, that is when they are not going to trust you. They're not going to view you as credible. They are not going to be influenced by you, regardless of how good you actually are. Now, every single person does this automatically. No matter who you're speaking to, no matter what you're listening to, you are listening to the words, but you're also getting a feeling of how the message is coming across. And this is why tone is so important. Everything layers on each other like a wonderful slice of cake that's together delicious. Okay? You are that slice of cake. Be mindful of your layers. When people listen to the message and they feel the emotion behind the message, they're listening to someone's tone and they're getting a sense of, do I believe what this person is saying based on the way that they're saying it and the emotion that they're adding to it? So let me give you an example. If someone is apologizing and they're saying sorry to you, and they're saying, I'm sorry, and their tone is slow, apologetic, mindful, those two match and you're more likely to believe it. But if someone is saying sorry and they say it with that like petty resentment, anger, like sorry, the two mismatch. It doesn't matter that they said sorry. You are not going to believe them. Matter of fact, you're going to get more angry at them, right? So that's those two. But whether or not those two match also matters based on what you're seeing. So if someone says, I'm sorry, and they say it slowly, and you feel like their words and their emotions match, but maybe their face is like smirking, right? Then you're like, oh, something's a little bit off here, right? And what you'll find is that this happens automatically in the moment. And if you're someone who tends to reflect or maybe overthink, you might then analyze bits and pieces of this and replay it in your head to try and unpack why you didn't believe them or why you're angry at what they said. And it always comes down to either what they said, how they said it, or how they looked while saying it. And despite this happening automatically, what you'll find based on yourself and based on just life experience looking at the people around you, everyone naturally tends to pay attention to one out of the three a little bit more deeply than the other two. And so think about the conversations you're having, or especially the miscommunication and the moments of disagreement you've had with people in your life. Some people will really focus in on the actual words that you use. Like, you said this. The implication of this word is this. And that's when people come across it like, I didn't mean it that way, because they're not mindful of their word choice, while the other person is very attuned to the words they're hearing. Then you'll hear people who have miscommunication or argue and will pick up on like, I don't care that you said sorry. You don't mean it, right? You don't sound like you mean it. And that is a big indication that they're attuned to the feeling, to the tone, to the way that the words are being said with the emotion. And so that's why that matters so much as well, because you could say I'm sorry all day long, but if you're apathetic or angry or just like off the cuff, you don't mean it and people won't notice. And so the last one is visual. And that's when people really pay attention and unpack how you look while you speak. And so this comes across as like, well, you don't look sorry, right? They're looking at, how are your eyebrows? What's your mouth doing? Are you giving me puppy dog eyes? Or are you sort of like squinting and smirking and like, I'm sorry, right? Visually matters as well. Or are you saying sorry when you're just like on your phone? I'm sorry, without even looking up. All three together is what you need to understand. Most people pick up on all three automatically and have a slight preference for one out of the three a little bit deeper. But regardless, when you're working on being influential, you need to start considering your internal signals, your verbal signals, and your visual signals. Each one of them has to be giving a green light on the exact same message and meaning. That is how you create trust, you create credibility, and the two combine to make you an influential communicator. But when you are giving a green light, a yellow light, a red light, and you're just sending out mixed signals, you are creating a chaotic intersection where people are just left saying, you know what? I'm just going to hold back and I'm not going to follow through. And there's just a little something off here that I don't quite trust. And so comment down below and let me know which out of the three signals you think have been a little bit wonky for you and which ones you're going to start working with. Now, if you want to unpack exactly what kind of signals you think you're sending and identify the kind of signal mistakes that you've been making, check out down below. I've created a free 180 signals assessment that you can download and start unpacking today, because being an influential communicator is important. And there's no reason to continue delaying your ability to communicate well. So check out the resource down below. Comment down below and let me know which of the signals you are going to start working on first, or which you think has been your strongest. Because let's be honest, not all three are equal, and some are just fundamentally easier than others. Now, I hope you found this useful, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.